Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for being on time. Thank you for joining us today. Welcome to Transform to One's webinar on mental health in children ages 13 to 18. My name is Shani, and I am going to be your host. Along with Francine, today we're going to guide you through this evening session. We want to say thank you to everyone who was able to join our session last week, where we spoke to the adults and parents who work with children ages 0 to 12. And if you're back on today, just drop something in the chat to let us know you're back. Thank you for being here again. And today's session, again, just like last week, we are specifically addressing the parents and adults who work with children who were affected by Hurricane Melissa, or teenagers who were affected by Hurricane Melissa. But it doesn't have to be a direct impact. Last week, I mentioned that, I have a son, he's 10, and we are from Westmoreland. And so when we went down to visit or to check on our parents to see how they were, my son was with us, and it took a toll on him as well, just seeing the state that his grandparents were in, and just the whole journey of hoping that they are okay from time to time. And with social media and just media being out there, we know that persons in various parishes, though not directly affected, have also been affected in some way. And so we do hope, our intention is to just share and hopefully bring some support to persons who have been affected both directly and indirectly. So for our adults and children who experienced it, we sympathize with you, and this is our contribution from Transform to One to do what we can to support the community. A little bit about Transform to One. We are a Christian organization. We were founded in 2023 as directed by God's leading, and it's really just a space for healing and transformation. The team is a wide group of volunteers, including family and friends. Our mission statement is to foster healing and transformation through Christ-centered initiatives, and to accomplish the mission, we have so far published motivational journals. We have held a homeless feeding in Kingston. We have held a depression in children webinar last year. And we also host a series called Navigating Trauma. It's an in-person workshop here in Kingston. We want to thank our sponsors for making this possible. Our sponsors are SAC, which is a local-based or a Westmoreland-based company in Jamaica that does handmade bags, and Cube Studios, which is an architectural and project management company out of Kingston. All right, so thank you all for being available. Thank you to our presenters. I am handing over to Francine to introduce our first presenter for today.
So, our first presenter is Nordia Crawford. She's a professional counselor, educator, trainer, author. Her expertise includes workshops, training, general counseling. I'd put the writing as well, suicide prevention, coaching, and support and group support for retirement, depression, bullying, stress management. You realize, therefore, that she's not limited to hurricane, right? It's just stress that persons go under. So feel free to, as you ask the questions, recognize that one thing affects another, and she's available and able. Her publications are available for purchase in person or online at Amazon. And Nordia also hosts a bi-weekly virtual outreach series online with the counselor. Here she discusses essential mental health topics such as anxiety, depression, bullying, self-esteem, grief, and stress management. Get ready for her. Here she comes. Welcome, Nordia.
Thank you very much. A pleasant evening, everyone. My topic for today is what is trauma. We'll also look at how we can support teenagers or adolescents who have experienced traumatic events, especially the hurricane. We also want to look at what are some signs that we will observe in them. We also want to look at some behaviors that they may exhibit as a result of their traumatic experience. But before we go into that, I want to look at what is trauma. So what trauma is that it is a psychological and physical response to a deeply distressing or disturbing experience. And when we have that experience, it affects how we feel, it affects how we think, It affects how we behave. And sometimes long after the event is over, we have these traumatic experiences or these feelings or these behaviors. So in simple terms, what we're saying is that trauma happened when something overwhelms our ability to cope. And in this case, we all are aware of Hurricane Melissa. For some persons, it was more traumatizing than others because they were directly impacted. But for some, looking on at what happened to others, they were also impacted by the effect of the hurricane. There are different types of traumas. There is the emotional or the psychological trauma, and this type of trauma is caused by events such as abuse, violence, accidents, loss, or neglect. And of course, this can lead to fear, it can lead to anxiety, it can cause depression, or the person experiencing the trauma may have a difficulty trusting others. Then there's a physical trauma. And when we talk about the physical trauma, we're talking about body injury or physical harm. And this can come as a result of injuries from the hurricane. Sometimes there might be persons who are going outside trying to secure stuff and something blew from off a tree or from somewhere. And, that item may cause physical damage to the person. Sometimes there's also damage to property. Sometimes there's damage to livestock, etc. Persons might be physically traumatized as a result of accidents that takes place during the disaster, right? So you may have landslides. Sometimes persons may survive, but it may cause injury here or there to their person. And that is what we would call physical trauma. All right. Moving right along, there's also the acute versus the chronic trauma. So these are trauma, and what differentiates them is the time frame. So an acute trauma occurs when there's a single event, like a car crash. And when persons go home from that event, they may feel nervous, they may become jumpy or hyper vigilant, or they may have a difficulty sleeping. And so that may come as a result. Then there's a chronic trauma where there's ongoing events that result in the chronic trauma, such as ongoing abuse, whether physical, emotional, psychological. Then there is a PTSD, where this comes as a result of traumatic events. And one type of PTSD can come from the natural disasters that we experienced recently, or even earthquake. I remember there was one year when there was an earthquake here in Jamaica, I think maybe 3 or so years ago, and most persons were frightened as a result because it was the strongest tremor that persons experienced. And so PTSD developed as a result. And what you will observe in those persons with PTSD is that after the event has occurred, they may have difficulty sleeping. They may be afraid to even go out. If they were in high-rise building at the time, they may avoid going into a high-rise building. They may avoid going into the elevator because maybe at the time when the earthquake struck, they were in an elevator and the elevator would have reminded them about that experience. And these events, of course, they can affect many persons at the same time, as in the case of the hurricane. And sometimes there are some persons, when they survive, they feel guilty as a result. And so that's something we also want to look for. And it can cause other symptoms that's relating to PTSD. As I mentioned earlier, difficulty sleeping, avoiding the place that reminds them of the event, or sometimes they may have thoughts, we call it those intrusive thoughts that keeps coming in, that's intruding their minds, and they can't necessarily get rid of those thoughts easily. There's some common effects that trauma has on persons. I mentioned some earlier, flashbacks. So every minute you may hear a person say, boy, every minute the incident just flashed before my eyes. That is what we call flashback. There might be intrusive thoughts or intrusive memories, meaning that you might be there doing something and that memory invades your mental space, it invades your mind, it intrudes on you. You have no control over that. There might be trouble sleeping, or concentrating. Some persons may feel numb, some persons may feel anxious, or some persons may be easily startled. Some persons may be hypervigilant or jumpy. Those are the same thing. Just want to use those words so that we all understand what I'm saying. There might be persons who they avoid reminders of the event. So, for example, during the hurricane, we were in a house that maybe the hurricane came and caught persons, say, trapped in a house that was fixed on a hill. And so that person may avoid going into any house that is situated on a hill because once they're in that house, they remember the devastating effects of the hurricane. They remember the rains nonstop, the winds, and everything that comes with that experience. In some cases, trauma can lead to conditions like PTSD, as I indicated earlier. It's very important that we note that not everyone reacts to trauma the same way. So some persons might react in one way and other persons may react in another way. So what is overwhelming to one person may not be as overwhelming to the other. So it is important that we understand this and that we regard it as normal. Let's now look at how teens or adolescents, how they experience traumatic situations. Now, they do process their experience with disasters differently from younger children. And this is because of their age and their brain development at that time, they are more aware of danger and the long-term consequences. They're at the place where they're developing identity, they're developing independence, and they are able to think critically. So they know that, oh, this is happening at this time. I may need to do this. I may need to do that. I may not need to do this, right? And so you find that they have a different experience. They are more sensitive to peer relationship and social image. However, they may sometimes internalize their emotions or they may try to appear strong even if they're in distress. And it is important that we understand this because they might not be showing or they might not be sharing how they're feeling, but we may observe a difference or a change in their behavior. So some common emotional responses that we will observe in our teens. We may observe signs of shock and numbness. And this is where they may feel detached as if they are here and the situation or the experience or the event is happening somewhere else and they are not a part of the experience. They may have difficulty concentrating. They may be appearing to be calm, but they are not functionally emotionally. They are shutting down or they have shut down emotionally. Then there is fear and anxiety. And sometimes you'll observe this in those children or those teens or those adolescents. They worry about the safety of others, about safety of themselves, especially if they have family members who are directly being impacted or who are directly in the situation. So you may find that a teenager in Kingston may not be directly involved in what is happening in, say, Westmoreland, but they worry about a relative. I heard Miss Shani mention that earlier about her son. They might be worried, I wonder if grandma is okay. I wonder if grandpa is okay. And they might just ask every minute, how is grandma? I want to talk to grandma. And there's obvious distress. They may have fear that the disaster will happen again, or they may exhibit sleep problems, or you may find that they have nightmares. They're sleeping and they wake up and they're frightened and they tell you about these terrible dreams that they're having. There's anger and there's irritability. Now, these are some signs, but it may not be that they experience all of them. They may experience some or all of these signs, okay? So as it relates to anger and irritability, they may become frustrated with a disruption in their school routine. So they may have had an exam that was scheduled. And then on the day of the exam, that is when the hurricane comes or hits. And that gets them upset because now they were looking forward to this exam. They don't want to have to, you know, prepare anymore for this exam. They want to just get it out of the way. And so you may find that they become frustrated or they become irritable. There is increased conflicts with parents, teacher, or peers. They're acting out. They might not be able to express what is happening to them. And so you may see this exhibiting itself in their behavior. They may blame others or blame systems. Well, if this person never do that, and if this person do that or did that, then this would not happen. So they play the blame game. They may experience uncertainty or loss of control. So they may have questions. What's happening now? What's next? What will happen? What will happen for me and my exam that I did not get to take? You may find that they become helpless or feel helpless, or that they may express that they're feeling hopeless about the situation. They might be feeling hopeless about the future. They may also struggle with sudden changes in life plans. So you may find that as a result of the hurricane, there might have to be a relocation from that era to another era. And so they are not able to adjust to this sudden change that may come as a result. Now, there are instances, or there might be time when these reactions in the teenagers might be misunderstood. And the reason is that the emotional distress that they experience, they may show up as attitude or defiance. But it's not attitude, it's just their way of saying, I am hurting, I am frightened, I am nervous, I'm feeling helpless. They might not be able to articulate what is happening, and so you may find this coming out in their behavior or their attitude. They may withdraw instead of seeking help because it is so overwhelming that they think that withdrawing is the best way to cope. They may engage in risk-taking behaviors, and this may increase as a coping mechanism. And when we talk about risk-taking, they may try drugs, they may try promiscuity. They may sleep out or, hang out with friends. They may go places that are dangerous. And this is their way of trying to get away from the feelings that they're experiencing as a result of the trauma or from what is happening to them emotionally. So when our children experience traumatic events, we want to look out for some warning signs, and we want to look out for emotional signs. They may appear sad, and it may present itself as persistent sadness or hopelessness. And when we talk about persistent sadness, we're talking about sadness or hopelessness that lasts for more than a month after the disaster. It may last for more than a month, and it may increase in intensity. So they're more sadder than they were before. They're more saddened than they were before. They're feeling more hopeless than they were before. When we see this happening, it's time for us to consider, professional help for them. They may experience or display excessive worry or panic. They may also have mood swings or emotional outbursts. We may notice behavioral changes. They may withdraw from family or friends. They may not be any more interested in activities that they once enjoy, or you may notice that there is a decline in their academic performance. They may have sleep difficulty. Either they sleep too much or they're not sleeping at all. They might have difficulty with their appetite. So they may eat a lot, or they might not feel like eating at all, and they're refusing food. We may notice that they complain of frequent headaches or stomach aches. Then there's also depression, ongoing low mood. You notice that they're not their perky selves. They're not engaging as they used to engage. They're not laughing anymore. So for persons who have children in the home, is usually noisy, and you realize that the house is just so quiet all of a sudden, and you might be wondering what is happening. So yes, they may have that low mood that they may experience, and they may experience feelings of worthlessness. There might be anxiety. They are constantly on edge. They are worrying. They are fearful. They avoid reminders of the disasters, and sometimes they may experience panic attack. We mentioned substance use, that they may engage in substance use, whether drugs or alcohol, or you may find that they are more leaning towards a certain peer group that smokes. they might not become secretive because they know that they're smoking or they're drinking. And so these are some things we want to watch out for: reckless actions, defiance or aggression, poor decision making. How can we support our teens who have experienced traumatic situations, especially post Hurricane Melissa? We want to listen to them without judgment. Sometimes they're telling us things, we should listen. Don't dismiss them. So how you said that, or how you must do that, or why are you feeling this way? Listen and let them tell us how they're feeling. If it is that they're sharing with us and we are dismissing them, then of course they will go to someone who will listen, and that person that they turn to or look to might not be the best influence for them. We want to ensure that we validate their feelings. It is normal that you're feeling that way. Now I understand why you're feeling that way. It makes sense that you're feeling this way. We also want to encourage healthy coping mechanisms, healthy coping strategies. Let them exercise, journaling. You find that sometimes persons may not want to talk, but they write. And when they write, it helps them to offload mentally, emotionally. It helps them to offload right then and there. And the journal is a safe space for them. So encourage journaling, encourage them to talk. They can talk to a parent, a trusted friend, trusted family member, or they can talk to their peers. Want to provide safety and reassurance. So, of course, they need physically and emotional safety after a hurricane. So, as adults, we want to reassure them that the danger has passed and that support is available. And when we engage them with a calm and consistent behavior, this helps to reduce fear and uncertainty in them. Because when we are anxious ourselves and we show them that we're anxious, they feed on that, they pull from us, and that will cause them to continue feeling anxious. Maintain a routine. So, yes, they are used to a certain routine in the mornings when they get up to go to school. We want to try as best as possible to return to that so that they can feel relaxed, so that they can feel safe, so that they can feel normal. So we want to maintain their school routine, their meal routine, their sleep routine, and even recreational activities. Want to watch out for signs of trauma. So they may exhibit behaviors such as isolation, irritability, loss of interest, decline in school performance, sleep problems, risky behavior. All of these is very important. And I don't think I can stress it anymore because, as I said earlier, they might not be able to say outrightly that I am traumatized. And so they display these behaviors. And when they display these behaviors, it is important that we take note of them and that we get the necessary help. It's important that we limit their exposure to distressing media. We're in an age of technology, and at the click of a button, we can access YouTube, we can access TikTok, we can access so many different social media sites. And it's very important that we note that repeated exposure to frightening news reports, to videos or social media content about the hurricane, this can increase their anxiety. It can cause them to become more stressed. And so we want to help them to remain balanced and informed. So we want to ensure that we help to keep them away from one, graphic or repeated disaster imagery. We don't have any control over what is placed on Facebook or over what is on YouTube or the other social media platforms. But if we try to keep them away from continuous videos of flooded homes, collapsed buildings, or damaged communities, that will help to keep them calm, and it will help to reduce the effects of the traumatic experience. There sometimes might be repeated news clips showing people being rescued or stranded. There might be images of destroyed neighborhoods, and these sometimes are shared without warning, of a viewer discretion. We want to ensure that we try our best not to expose our children to this. And we can understand because even as adults, sometimes we see these videos and it's distressing to us. So you can imagine the effect that it will have on our teenagers. We want to also, so a second example is there might be news headline focusing heavily on deaths or missing persons. So I remember during Hurricane after Hurricane Melissa, there were reports that there were dead bodies, in the streets. And I think there was also a report that speaks to not having water for sanitization, and some persons were without food. And these things can be very distressing to our teenagers. So if we can at all cost protect them from these videos, or just not having them see these videos, to be very good. There might be social media posts speculating about fatalities, and this might not even be confirmed by the official news media. We want to also keep them away from emotional interviews with persons who are visually distressed, who are survivors of the event, because these things can play over in person's mind. It can cause sleep problems, it can cause anxiety, it can cause them to experience intrusive thoughts. So they're seeing these videos, and when they go to their beds at night, all they can remember is these videos. All they can remember is the man who was talking about this or talking about that. They can't focus while they're in school. They're having nightmares. They're not eating properly, or they eat too much. As we're on this though, there's also point to note that in general, we want to safeguard our children from these online influences, because there are a lot of online influences that are harmful to children. And one such influence is a network that is called 764. I want you to read up some more on this at the end of tonight's session. It's an online network that is linked to harmful content that targets vulnerable people, and our children and our teens are vulnerable. So we want to ensure that we at all costs safeguard them from these contents. We want to also encourage healthy coping skills. Now, we are a people of prayer. In Jamaica, we always pray. We pray for everything. I remember when hurricane was coming and we prayed, right? So we want to encourage our children to pray. We want to encourage them to take part in music and art, to relax their mind and their body. We want to encourage them to talk to trusted people or participate in community activities or church activities. There might be football game that is happening up the road. There might be a domino tournament. There might be a golf tournament. Anything that will keep them occupied and help them to relax. We want to encourage them to participate in that. We want to provide or promote social support. So encourage them to connect with friends, family, teachers, youth leaders, etc. This will help them to feel as if they are not alone. Because when we're going through our difficult times, it's always encouraging knowing that someone is there. It is even more encouraging speaking to persons who have experienced the same situation, because now we are at a place, or we can be at a place where we know that, this person understands me when I'm saying I feel stressed, I can't sleep. And then we can talk about that similar or same experience, and we can learn from each other as it relates to how can we improve our sleep, what can we do to feel better. So we learn from each other as we share our experience with others. We want to be patient with their emotional reactions. Sometimes we're busy and we're tired, but we have to remember to exercise patience. Some persons may recover quickly, but others may not necessarily recover quickly. If it is that persons are struggling long after, and we are overwhelmed ourselves as adults or as parents, as caregivers, remember that we are to seek professional help. Of course, as indicated earlier, children, teens, they look on us and they will pull from us. They model, they imitate us. And so it is very important that we ourselves model healthy coping behaviors. All right. So even if we're in distress, try not to talk about it in the presence of these children or these teenagers, right? We want them to see us smiling. We want them to see us being happy and being hopeful and practicing healthy coping behaviors, because it will help them in their time now as teenagers, and it will also help them to be resilient and to be able to engage in those healthy coping behaviors when they too become adults. Okay. The next point, or the final point, is we want to encourage you to seek professional help. So if we see that what is happening to them is becoming severe, so it's getting worse, or it is continuing for months after the event, we want to get help. Right? We want to get help from trained counselors. We want to get help from social workers. There are social workers in the community who can assist with getting help. Sometimes the help might not just be emotional, but it may include other areas like financial. So we can reach out to social worker for help for them. And as I close my presentation, I have some reflection questions that you can just think on as I make way for my co-presenter. What changes have you noticed in teens after stressful events? How can adults create a safe space for teens to express their emotions? What support systems are available in your school or your community? I believe these questions are pertinent for us to reflect on, and as adults who are seeking to help adolescents or teenagers navigate traumatic experiences. Thank you.
Thanks everybody for your contribution in that discussion. We're going to give Latoya her time. And so I'm introducing Latoya Flemming to you. Her responsibility outside of this is as a Dean of Discipline. Throughout her career, Ms. Flemming has committed herself to supporting, mentoring, advocating for young people while helping to create safe space. We're talking about that, structured and nurturing school environment. Her work centers on understanding the social, emotional, and environmental factors that influence students' lives, and so she guides them toward positive choices and personal growth. She sees her job as a calling and a ministry, guided by the principles of working for God through serving others. She approaches her role with humility, integrity, and love. She believes that every child deserves dignity, opportunity, and someone willing to stand in their corner. Her philosophy is inspired by the understanding that true service reflects God's love in action. She strives to be a vessel of hope, healing, and transformation. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, we're ready to hear, ready to ask questions and continue participating. Welcome.
Thank you very much, Ms. Barry. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for having me. So this evening, while we continue discussing mental health, I'll start by sharing my presentation and then we go from there. So we are talking about mental health, everyone, and Ms. Crawford would have put it lovely in terms of what to look for, strategies to utilize when we see these things happening within our teams. She spoke about trauma, the impact of trauma, and how it is we can navigate with our teens. Now, I'm going to delve a little bit further into, yes, mental health within our teens, but I also ensure that we look at some specific areas. But before I go there, we were having lovely discussions, but I just want to do a mental check-in. And I'm doing a weather check-in. So I'm going to ask Miss Barrett and Miss Mullings just in the chat, or if person wish to just openly state and we move on. If your feelings today were a weather condition, what would it be and why? I'm just going to speak about normalizing shifting emotions and encouraging expressions. So while Ms. Crawford would have mentioned earlier some of the things that our teens will go through, I want for us to understand that it is normal for feelings to change. Hence the reason why I would have utilized that weather analogy. A lot of times we say, these kids, them feelings change just like the weather. But at the end of the day, and just like how we would say it for adults, and we say it for kids, so even if the feelings change, this is a process, and we can consider this a healthy process. And what I want for us to understand is that despite the fact that our feelings might change, It doesn't change the fact that we go through roller coaster, but it is how we navigate and deal with these feelings, right? So encouraging teens to identify and name their emotions is the first step towards healing. And what they would have gone through during the passage of Hurricane Melissa is one arena that brings, as Miss Crawford would have said, a lot of traumatic events. Some having PTSD, and how it is we work with these teens will be of utmost importance going forward. Because despite the fact that Melissa would have passed a few months ago, there are still kids reeling with the effects. There are kids within our school space to this date who have not been normalized in terms of being in a space they were once accustomed to. There are kids who still, parents are able to purchase uniforms for them to come back in the space. So a lot of these things might be overwhelming. So how is it we're going to encourage them to normalize such behaviors? So this afternoon, I'm going to zoom in on 3 specific areas. So I'm going to look at how it is we communicate, how it is we build trust with teens and adolescents. Because, ladies and gentlemen, that is important. We're going to also look at how we navigate the disruption to education. Ms. Crawford also spoke about identity crisis. They're at the space now, teenagers at the point now where they're trying to understand who they are. And then we also want to look at what are their future goals looking like. And lastly, we want to look at community support systems. So what systems are out there to support these kids going through the turmoil? And what do we consider to be safe space for them to navigate, right? So we'll look firstly at, acknowledging their emotions, impact on teens after disaster. And we spoke about that. Young people may appear strong, but often carry fear, sadness, and uncertainty following a hurricane. And hurricane interrupt routines, families, and challenges a teen's sense of safety and normalcy. So they go through something that maybe we as adults can quickly, as we would say, bounce back from, but it's not so for teenagers. Teenagers might not be able to just bounce back quickly. So it's for us now as the adults in the space, being in direct contact with these kids, it's for us now to learn how to communicate with these teens and help them, guide them throughout the process. And one of the first things, as I mentioned, we're going to look at is how do we communicate with them? How do we build trust? How do we build that working relationship? And in order for us to do that, there are a few things that we absolutely must do. So communication is one of the strongest tools we have after disaster or after any given situation when we want to build a relationship with our teens. And we must understand that teens do not always openly say they are hurting. Their pain may show up through silence, anger, withdrawal, or behavioral changes, or even in the case of the young lady where she attempted suicide. So it comes in many forms. So once these things rear their ugly head and they pop up, ladies and gentlemen, how do we deal with them? How do we communicate with teens to prevent such situations? And I say we start with building that relationship. So building the communication bond with our teens. And one of the things we want to look at is active listening techniques. Now, ladies and gentlemen, it might seem like, oh, but me listen to me teen. But it's more than just having a listening ear. It's about giving your teens full attention. So if your teenager come to you or at school, at a community center, at church, or at home, you want to ensure that when you're talking to your teenagers and they come to talk to you, provide the eye contact. Don't be doing your chores just the same and then, you might nonchalantly say to a child, go ahead, man, I'm listening. You don't want to do that, ladies and gentlemen. You want to ensure that we give them the full attention they deserve and we provide the eye contact. I'm going to remind us, though, that we can have extenuating circumstances, ladies and gentlemen, where in that moment a child might approach you and you're not able to really and truly actively listen. What I normally recommend to persons is to say, turn to that individual, turn to that child and say, listen, this might not be the opportune time. Give me 5 minutes, give me 10 minutes, at which time we will have the conversation. But don't nonchalantly dismiss the child. We want to also read verbal and nonverbal cues. What am I talking about, ladies and gentlemen? I'm talking about the hidden languages, the facial tone, the way, the body language, the facial expressions. These are areas in which you might see them saying things and you not even realize that the child is reaching out. So it's important to, when you're having a conversation, look at the facial expression, the tone in which a child speaks to you. Sometimes we might get upset and say, yeah, lose your marbles, how did we go there? But it can be a cry for something else. So when we see these things happening, don't dismiss them. Let's see how best assess the situation and see how best you can deal with it. You also want to, in building the communication and bond, you also want to build psychological safety. And nothing is more important than a child feeling safe in a space, feeling accepted, feeling be respected, where they can truly express themselves and know that there is confidentiality, because that is important. A teen want to know that when you come to them and have the conversation, ladies and gentlemen, you are having a conversation where you let them understand that, in the counseling terminology, they will say to you, unless you become harm to yourself or others, what you say to me is in confidence. Most persons won't necessarily express that. But what I want for parents and individuals to understand is you want to ensure that if it is you deemed it necessary to break a teen's trust, you want to ensure you have the conversation with the teen. And when I say break trust now, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about you find out that this child come to you in confidence, say, boy, so I feel like I want to take my life because things at home not right and what have you. You want to let the child understand that this is something that is beyond my scope, my capabilities. I will have to have the conversation and have the conversation with the child. Let the child understand I'm going to reach out to Miss Crawford, who is a guidance counselor, because this is a matter that she's better equipped to assist you with. And from there, you build the understanding. But what you don't want to do, ladies and gentlemen, is if a child comes to you, you just have the child's business a blurt all over for need for conversations. But really and truly, let the child understand that they can come to you because there's safety where you are concerned. You want to build trust in times of crisis. And when I talk about building trust in time of crisis, you want to ensure that your bond, you will always hear this, our bond is our word. So what you want to have persons understand is that whenever you have persons coming in to talk with you, and you say something to them, you mean what you say. And when I say you mean what you say, ladies and gentlemen, you let them understand that if they come to you and you say to them, okay, I am going to do X, Y, Z. It is X, Y, Z, ladies and gentlemen, and not something else. Because if you have the conversation with the teens and then you find out later down the line that, they find out later down the line that, oh my God, they said to me, or he or she said to me, or Miss Jones said to me that this would have been a situation, but only to realize that you did the opposite of that. So we want to ensure that when we communicate these things to our teens, we are doing it and we're truthful to our words. And again, Miss spoke about the warning signs and referral considerations. So when it is you see the signs, ladies and gentlemen, and there are things that are concerning, we want to have the conversation with our teens. And once we have the conversation with our teens and we do the necessary referrals, the teen understands why it is you are doing a referral, not just to take them up and say, oh, I'm sending you to so and so because you need help. Have the conversation with the teen, man. Let them understand why you're concerned, your areas of concern, why you're doing the referral, and how it is you can guide the process and work alongside the teen in ensuring that they get the requisite help that they need. And once we move on from communication, we are going to move now quickly into building trust in teens. So communication and building trust comes hand in hand. And one of the things I want to highlight is how it is we are going to prioritize quality connection. And I cannot emphasize enough, ladies and gentlemen, that when we talk about prioritizing quality connections with our teens, we're talking about trying the 10-10 rule. And what the 10-10 rule states is that by giving your child your undivided attention for 10 minutes in the morning when they wake up, and I know a lot of persons going to say, boy, that's hard. Because when you have to think about wake up to beat the morning traffic, ladies and gentlemen, I know it might be hard based on our work, but we have to, in order to build a relationship with our teens, with our adolescents, we have to prioritize quality connection. And one of them is in the morning. So if you're teaching your teens, so for example, fry an egg, when they're frying their egg and you're moving about making your coffee, have the conversation. You're going to school today, what would have been the subject you have in the morning or the best when you go to work, but have conversations with your child. And if you're able to, and I always encourage persons, have a little devotion in the morning with your child. So if it is even to say, Lord, keep us safe on our journey in mercies. But we start there. So 10 minutes in the morning, let the child understand that you are forever building a conversation. You know, one of the joys for me is when I wake up in the morning and my 8-year-old son says to me, Mommy, how was your night? It gives me a warm feeling to know that I would have had a child at such age, you know, expressing, and it gives me the warmth to know that we have that connection, that bond where, and then he'd further go on to say, you know, I dreamt about so and so. So it's those little nuggets, ladies and gentlemen, that prioritize quality connection, prioritize quality time. And then we want to ensure that 10 minutes, for the first 10 minutes when they return home. So whether it is they return home from church, from school, from an outing, have a conversation. How was your day? What did you do while you were out? That kind of thing. But you want to ensure you have the child understand that you are interested and you're vested in all that is happening to them. It's not just about ensuring that they get lunch money. It's not just about ensuring that they get up and go to school, but you're vested in your day-to-day activities. You want to know more about their friends and things like those. And then the last one is 10 minutes before bed, have the conversation. Teenagers, we won't necessarily do a story reading, but we can have a Bible lesson being read, and we can have a little conversation around it, and we can have prayer and we go off to bed. These are the things. So I want us to start there. If we have not, ladies and gentlemen, I want us to start there. Start with prioritizing quality connection, and it speaks by doing the 10-10 rule. It will not happen perfectly off overnight, ladies and gentlemen, but once we continue to progressively repeat, it becomes a routine. It becomes a routine. And once we would have built the communication, built the trust, and we now have a working relationship, we can now look at establishing trust that requires adults to be honest. And ladies and gentlemen, this is one of the things that I find that a lot of persons are having challenges with. Is where we tell the child one thing and we do the opposite of. We are trying to be honest with our children, but in the same breath of building trust, we are breaking the trust when we are not being honest. We want to be honest. We want to be available. And if we say to a child that we are going to be taking the individual somewhere, one thing I always say to a parent, if your child asks you to assist with X and Y and you're not available, be honest. But do not tell your child, oh, I am available, I will do. And at the opportune moment, you change your mind. Oh, I'm not available. And sometimes you don't even explain to the child why you're not available. We don't want to do these things, ladies and gentlemen, if we want to build trust with our teens and consistency in their support. Consistency goes a far way. And one of the biggest challenges I find is that we often send the students off to school and that's about it. We want to be consistent in supporting them, not just at home, but at school. In the for community involvement, we want to do that. So if it is we need to attend the PTA meetings, parents ensure we do. And if you're not able to, send a designate, but ensure we we are consistent in supporting our teens. We also want to look at validating teens' emotion. One of the things we must understand, ladies and gentlemen, just as we as adults have feelings, they do too. And a lot of times what I find is that we do not value teens, we dismiss them. So when they come and they say something to us, we foolishness. And sometimes we don't give them the opportunity to speak. We shut them down even before they get a chance to really express how they're feeling. And these are some of the things we have to work on if we want to build trust with our teens. So when they talk to us, respond, man, I hear you. Or, yeah, man, that sounds difficult. Or, yeah, man, that's something you can work out. And then you move on to speak about engaging and encouraging small efforts, small goals. So when you talk about, yeah, man, that might be difficult, but you can do it this way, you could do it that way in order to attain. So when we set achievable goals, when you have the conversation with your child, with your children, when you have conversation with the teens at the youth club, at church, you want to set small, attainable goals. So if they're having challenges in a particular area, if they're having challenges with certain things within a space, you want to ensure that when you speak with them, you said, all right, so you're having a challenge with, for example, social studies at school. This is how you're going to approach. What's the name of your teacher? When you get the downtime, have the conversation with your teacher. Let the teacher understand that this might be your challenge. And then from there, now you work out a way in which you're going to address the situation. And then if it means that you're going to get family support, youth club support, community support to help you to attain a 70, moving from a 60% average to a 90% average in social studies. That is what you want to do. So parents, sometimes you don't have to do it alone. You can get the requisite help from other persons within the space. And it's the same thing for a teacher. You have a child that you're having the struggles with. Get help from the home. When I send home homework, mommy, ensure that it is done. Ensure that when you go to Sunday school, if Sunday school Bible lessons is sent home, ensure that the child participate next week when they come. These are the things I'm speaking about. And the last one we're looking at here is create safe spaces. And we want to create safe space. Environments exist where teens feel secure to express themselves without fear. And when we talk about that, ladies and gentlemen, we want to ensure that if your child, mommy and daddy, if your child comes home and says to you, daddy X and Y, mommy X and Y, they are not afraid to come to you because you would have had a relationship, you would have built a trust factor where your child know that when I come to mommy and daddy to explain my situation, they will have my back and understand, and we work it through from there. If I go to church as a teen, I have that trusted person that I can go to and say to sister so and so, this is happening, and I would like you to help me to speak with mommy. And if you go to a youth, and if a child goes into a youth club space, the same is established. So we want to ensure at all times that whichever space we find teens in, and we're working with teens, we ensure that we create a space where they feel validated, to come and explain how it is they're feeling, what it is they're going through, and how it is we can work through it for them to achieve the ultimate. So once we would have done that, ladies and gentlemen, in terms of building the trust factor, which is of importance, we would have already been on our way to creating that working relationship that we want to have with our teens. And then we have to now look at education and future goals. So since the passage of Hurricane Melissa, how has the teens' education been disrupted? What do their future goals look like? Are they having identity crisis? Are they dealing with the situation well? Are they succumbing to the pressure? These are some of the things that, ladies and gentlemen, we question, and we want to know how best is it that we are going to deal with these situations. So one of the first things I want to remind us is that for teens, school is vital for friendships, achievements, identity, and future aspirations. And when I speak about these things, ladies and gentlemen, I'm talking about a lot of times I see it in my school system where the child is sent to school on a daily basis. And it is as if the school is the home, the church, the community support, all in one. And while it is good that we can provide such, we want to ensure that we step away from that, but we ensure that all the stakeholders, the community, the church, and all these stakeholders come together to provide the support that is needed. I'm not sure how many persons would have seen a recent article in the Observer where a particular school in Westmoreland PTA body they've been demonstrating because their concern is since the passage of Hurricane Melissa, the school is still in disrepute. There are still debris and things like that many months later. And while the PTA persons might say they don't necessarily support the method of, demonstration, at least we can see where the community is making an effort in terms of garnering the necessary answers. And sometimes, ladies and gentlemen, that is what we need to do. We need to be able to advocate for our kids to understand what is happening. Because with the passage of Hurricane Melissa and the interruption of learning loss, there is a concern when it comes on to teens, because we're in the age gap now where we're talking about teens who might be sitting external exams such as CXC. So what is happening for these kids and their SBAs to be submitted? What is happening to these kids and their CXC exams for them to sit? And what will be happening for the school as it pertains to preparation for coming September? So a lot of times when we have these interruptions, the kids are traumatized. And what we want to do is ensure that we work through it, get the necessary NGOs involved. If we have to reach out to non-governmental agency, if we have to ensure that we reach out to the church, if we have to ensure that youth clubs, different entities, to see how it is we can put homework centers in place and things like those to ensure that the learning loss that might have been interrupted, they are being gained elsewhere. We speak about effects on self-esteem and identity development. I realized that during the passage also, a lot of students, when they came back into the space, they came back with fear and doubt as to, reintegration for those who they would have been getting the questions. Oh, I heard that your home has been destroyed. Where are you living? We want to ensure that when these questions come to these students and they don't know how best to navigate, we're able to help them to, go through the process, for them understand, recognize, and, help them to build resilience, help them to restore positive self-esteem. And by doing that, we can ensure that they develop the way they should and they're able to function within the space. I mentioned earlier about exams. Some even when it comes on to graduation, they will express not being able to graduate due to issues of finances But one of the things I've encouraged students and let them understand that while it is an opportune moment for you to really and truly, you would have achieved, it would have been a milestone. There are nuggets to be taken from it to understand that graduation, while it is beautiful and all of that, at the end of the day, concentration is on your CXCs, your exit exams, and if I can find the avenues to assist you with graduation, I'll do so. But priority for us at this moment would have been for education and also family rebuilding. I always say to students, ladies and gentlemen, that the family and the school has to work in tandem in order to help students achieve to their utmost. And we want to monitor progress. We want to ensure that at the end of the day, they are progressing the way they should. So are there areas that needs improvement? And if that is the case, who will be doing the monitoring? Who will be ensuring that the child is on par to achieve goals that would have been set by the individuals and by the individuals working together to help this child along the path of success? And once we would have looked at the support for education, it goes hand in hand, ladies and gentlemen, that we look at the community support, another stakeholder. And when we look at community support, we go back again, ladies and gentlemen, to the safe physical and emotional space. One of the things that we know might not be 100% right now for some of the students is the physical space being the safest. But one of the things I encourage parents, stakeholders, and individuals to do is to ensure that they have the teens feeling safe in whichever space they are placed. And then the emotional support is of utmost importance. So it goes back again to ensuring that the emotional turmoil, safety, just allowing them to speak freely how it is there, what it is they're going through, what is happening with them, and emotionally you support them the best you can. So from a community standpoint, we can provide mentorship and counseling, which speaks to guidance from mentors, and professional counseling are vital. So these are vital resources. So we want to find persons that can provide mentorship for our teens. We can go into the church. We can find church sisters and brothers. We can find mentors within the school. So you have a senior teacher that you want to peer with a child that might be having challenges, that can be done. So those are the different areas. There are youth clubs for recreational activities. There are youth clubs within some communities that can be utilized. So you want to ensure you encourage persons or personnels and let them understand that you can reach out to this center. There might be a learning hub at this location. And once you have those, you want to ensure that they're able to engage in activities that are healthy outlets for whatever stress they might be experiencing and things like those. And one of the things we must be mindful of, and I speak on, is peer support networks. One of the global thing now is WhatsApp. And most persons have a smartphone. So I always encourage individuals to create the WhatsApp group for meaning conversation. And sometimes we can start there by connecting with our peers through WhatsApp groups. Things might be happening, how it is, share a quote, share an encouraging word. Encourage our teens from a young age to be able to not just send the videos of the fights and the negativities and those things, but inculcating them on understanding that you want to share positive thoughts. You want to share things that are of utmost importance to building the mind and things like that. You want to also look at referral pathways and community. So how it is we're going to get them the appropriate help. Ms. Crawford would have mentioned earlier some of the avenues that we can take. And we looked earlier on roles of schools, the roles of the church, youth clubs. So the role of the school to ensure that we provide the educational pathways, the church where it's necessary for them to, give spiritual guidance, and the youth clubs again to ensure that teens can have outlets in which they can connect and indeed achieve a mental stability. We want to it's creating positive environment after disaster is of utmost importance. And together, not just one person in some cases, but the different entities, the school, the church, the home, family support, the diaspora, reaching out to persons overseas, the different areas are all avenues that we can utilize in order to get the support we need for our teens. I mentioned earlier about getting the requisite support, so finding professional help. I want to remind us, ladies and gentlemen, that you do not have to handle it alone. If concerning behaviors persist, don't wait. Initiate a gentle conversation and reach out. And as I said earlier, ladies and gentlemen, in having the gentle conversation, you want to explain to your teen, why is it you think that it is necessary for us to have the conversation? Why is it you think you need to reach out? What are the concerning things you're seeing that you might say, no, it is happening too often, it is repeating itself, so we might need to get external help. And let your teen understand that I will be there with you to guide the process, to support you day in, day out. So I mentioned the family court, I mentioned local trusted community organization like the church, the police, CPFSA, and these are just a few. And there are others out there that you can indeed reach out to. Ms. Crawford had mentioned it earlier that she's also available. And indeed, Transform for One, Miss Mullings is also another avenue that you can also explore to get the requisite help that you may need. So hope remains after disaster, ladies and gentlemen. Even when communities face physical damage, the spirit of hope can endure and guide recovery efforts. And if it is one thing I know, ladies and gentlemen, Jamaicans, we have that spirit and we will indeed endure. But we want to ensure that we provide the necessary support for our teens. Right? Emotional impacts on teens. Teenagers often carry invisible emotional burdens like fear and uncertainty after a storm. So this now is an avenue where you would have gotten a few little nuggets, ladies and gentlemen, from which we can now work with our teens. Conquering emotional challenges with the right support, teens can overcome the emotional and social difficulties caused by disaster. So we're going to get what, ladies and gentlemen, in together. We're going to get the school, the church, the community, the family. So as one, all the stakeholders coming together, we are going to support our teens. I want to focus beyond physical damage. So I understand, yes, we need to rebuild the house. I understand that. I know that we need to rebuild roads but it is crucial to address less visible emotional toll disasters take on young people. So how are they coping mentally? So these are some of the things, ladies and gentlemen, we need to be mindful in moving forward in helping our teens with mental health. So together we can solve the mental health puzzle. Your teen's mental health is not luxury, it's foundation. With connection, compassion, and the right support, every child can rebuild resilience and thrive. So what I want us to remember, ladies and gentlemen, recognize, know the warning signs early. Ms. Crawford had told you a few of them, and even some persons would have mentioned a few of them. So we are aware of them. And once you recognize them, connect. Build trust through daily presence. So connect with your teen. Connect with them, man. Build that relationship. Build that working relationship. And once you do all of that, we're going to finally act by seeking help when it is needed. By seeking help, ladies and gentlemen, when it is needed. I thank you. The end is just the beginning.